Okay, in today's video I'm going to go through the process of installing the metal Quickset star onto the 56 series rocker arm. This is a video I'm somewhat disappointed to make, as I figured that most watchmakers trying to attempt this would really have the ability, knowledge, skills and equipment to be able to do the job and not really to have too much trouble with it, but apparently that's not the case. So I'm going to go through it today and just show the process as simply as I can, just to make life easier. I'd suggest if you've got a watchmaker that can't handle this sort of job, I'd look for someone else. It's not a difficult job at all, and with the tools required it's incredibly simple. And if your watchmaker doesn't have these tools, then they're probably not equipped properly, and I'm not really bothered about saying that whatsoever. So the first tool that we're looking at here is the staking tool, which is basically essential to do this job well. And the one that I use is second-hand, it's not a new one. And you can see there it's got a base that you can rotate, and it's got a whole set of holes down the bottom, and the top section where the stake goes in is eccentric, and you can use that to centralize the stake on the hole. Now the set that I'm using has a base as well. I'd suggest that to do this job well you really need one that has a base so you can reverse the stakes. And yeah, I'd say it's possible to do without reversing the stakes, but it just makes life a lot easier. So we're going to use a few stakes in total here, and unfortunately they're not really in focus. But you'll see there we've got one stake that's got a hole in it. We have a flat stake and another flat stake, but it's got an extremely thin sticky outy bit on it basically, which you can see there. And that's all we really need to do this job. You do need, if buying one of these sets, do look for a fairly good array of stakes. You can buy them new from cousins or similar supply houses, but it just makes life a lot easier if you've got a fairly good selection. So the first step I'm going to do is to put the stake with the hole in it in the bottom, and you can see there that sticks out quite a bit. And the reason I like to use this one for this part of the job is that it just goes over the pin that's in the middle of the assembly, and that's about it, and that's what we want to achieve. Now I'm going to try and centralize it. So that's a centering stake, and I put that down the middle and just adjust it until that's perfectly in the center. This is pretty difficult to do when you're trying to film the whole process as well. And you can see that I've just rotated the eccentric part at the top and the base at the bottom, and technically it should be central. So now I'm just going to bring over the rocker arm there, and this is the one that's broken. So the part that breaks on these is the plastic star part. Just over time the plastic shrinks and splits, and it happens on all of them, unfortunately. So I'm going to turn that over so that the flat part of the assembly is at the top, and I'm going to press out the pin that's in the middle with the stake that's got the very thin spigot on it. Now before I do anything, I'm just going to make sure that that is central on the pin, because if it's off I could possibly damage the assembly. And in this case I've determined that it's off center, so I'm going to take the whole thing out again and just try and centralize it again. But first I'll just show how it's seated in there. And it should be enough zoom here that you can see what's happening. So I'm just going to release the eccentric part again and also the base and just get it central yet again, and we should be good now. And you'll see that the pin section will just go in the middle of that that stake with the hole in it, and we're just going to press out the pin from the back. And it should be pretty clear, I think, from here what we're going to do. Now I'm just going to get the hammer, because you just tap it out with a hammer. Now it only requires a very light tap, so I prefer to just tap it lightly a few times rather than one heavy hit. And you should be able to see there now that the assembly split apart. Which is exactly what we wanted to happen. Now the pin and the wave washer that come out, that are pressed out, are actually going to fall inside the stake. So we're going to need to tip that up and just get those parts out, because we definitely want those parts. And to do that, I've got to take the base off and then take the stake off, and I just tap it on the desk, and that normally everything comes out. So you can see there those two parts have come out, and we don't want to lose those. So the pin is the pin that goes through the entire assembly, and the waved washer was originally a tension spring for the plastic part on top of the gear there, which is the one that breaks. But what we're going to do, and that's the whole assembly there when you've got it apart, so it's several pieces. What we're going to do with that wave washer though is we're going to put it under the assembly to give the part a little bit more tension from the bottom, and it also pushes the part up a little bit so it gets slightly more interface with the day intermediate wheel. It doesn't really need a lot because there's no torque on the day wheel at all, but it's actually the date wheel that requires quite a bit of torque to turn and usually breaks this part. So what we're going to do now, I'm just assembling all the parts there, so I've got them in one place. But what we have to do now is we need to split the old plastic star off of the gear. And the way I normally do that is just with a scalpel, and I just get the blade in between the plastic part and the gear. I'm not too worried about damaging the plastic part because it's going to get thrown away anyway. And just holding everything in my fingers for this just to make life easier, but normally if I was doing this I'd probably support it with an old oiler or something like that. It comes off very easily, so it's really not difficult at all. And I'm going to turn it up so that the boss of the gear is facing up, because that's what we're going to press the new metal star gear onto. That's what it rides on. And the star gear is designed with a slot in it so it can be pressed on easily. And that's how we're going to arrange it right there. And we're going to line it up on top of that boss. It's a little bit fiddly to line up, but once you press it on, it really makes a lot of sense and it's very easy. Now I just press these on with the back of the tweezers, which works just fine. You don't need any special tools to do it. Okay, that's now pressed on. And now we just have to put the rest of the assembly back together so we can press it back together again. So now that's what we've got. And we're going to put the pin so that the spigot of the pin faces up, and we're just going to slide the parts on. So that's now got the pin in the middle and the wave washer. Now we're going to set up the staking tool again so that we can press the assembly back together. And for this you don't need the base, but I started assembling it with the base. But you'll see later I'll decide not to do it that way. Doesn't really matter. But I would assume that the people who would be watching this and looking at doing the job would know the best way to do this. Now the reason I decided to use a stump instead of another inverted stake is you've just got a little bit more room to move. So now the staking tool's set up so that we can press the part back together. And I'm going to put the wheel assembly on top of the stump first. And you can see that there. Now I'm going to get the plate part of the assembly. And you'll see that there's two sides to this. So one of them has a cutout and the whole wheel assembly is supposed to sit inside the cutout. And I'm going to put that on top of the wheel assembly and look very closely to make sure that the pivot side of it is actually lined up with the hole on the plate. And when it's lined up, we're going to give it a tap very lightly. And what I find is if I just put my fingers on the very top of the eccentric part of the stake and hold them between that and the stake, I can actually feel a very light drop when it goes in. And I find that a good way just to judge that you've actually got it right. So now the assembly's back together, and I'm going to hold the wheels with the tweezer in a sec. That's the completed assembly there. Now I'm going to hold the wheels with the tweezer and just rotate it just to make sure that it's going to work okay. Now if you've got it wrong, this will not rotate. But you can see there it's quite free. We're not going to have a problem with it at all. And that's the job done. So when you're not trying to film this and you're basically calm and don't have any other interruptions, this job shouldn't take more than 10 minutes, 15 minutes at the most. And now that it's actually got a metal wheel on there, you can throw the whole assembly into the cleaning machine, whereas you couldn't before when it had the plastic section on it, because the plastic section would melt. And that's the job totally done. So thanks for watching, and I hope that clears that question up.